Solo Leveling Arise is one of the most unique mobile games that I have ever played. It's full of positives that give me enough of an impact to at least forget that this is a game that requires you to grind all the time. What I mean by that is that this is the type of game that gives you enough of a dopamine boost where by the time you realize you have been grinding for hours, you'll be invested enough in the game to the point where giving up will feel like you have wasted time. And that's exactly how I felt after my first video. To get the full picture, I highly recommend you to watch this video first, but suffice to say that the game started off strong with the amazing visuals, fully voiced main storyline, and the surprisingly addictive side content even for free-to-play players. The honeymoon, however, is already done. I've almost already finished my character progression to the point where only the numbers will be higher when I attack an enemy, so to satisfy my dark urge to say that this game is awful after the first hour, I thought I would give Solo Leveling Arise another chance. My expectation was that the following chapters will be a mindless grind with close to zero content, but boy was I so wrong. Since I knew that the game will eventually roadblock me with missions that require me to be stronger, I have decided to put my character on autopilot while working on other video projects. Therefore, if I do get blocked by a dungeon boss that is impossible to beat on my current level, all I will have to do is to figure out what's in my inventory. This of course did eventually happen, but before I've got there, I'll have to explain exactly what I was looking for between the grindy missions, and I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure that the average player will get satisfied by my conclusion. I can confidently say that if you are a lore nerd like me, you will feel the same way as I did yesterday. Last episode I have defeated playing the story mode right after defeating Baruka, and just like in the anime, Sung Jin-woo had to enter the demon castle. I'll be honest guys, I have no idea that Solo Leveling Arise will answer a question about the anime that I didn't think I wanted to know. If you remember the third episode of season 2, Sung Jin-woo was unusually frustrated when his shadow soldiers got destroyed by Vulcan, which wasn't the case before. Of course there was a reason, and that is the fact that the episode had a lot of cult content. I've only started reading the manhwa when Jin-woo first met Asiel, which is right after he defeated Kargalan. Therefore, Jin-woo's bonding process with his shadows was skipped. Of course you had to fight a couple of monsters, and when I saw how many missions I'm supposed to do, I have remembered that for the developers, a challenge means monsters just got twice as much health. And while this is still true to an extent, the game finally started to actually feel harder. New enemy types got introduced, the monsters were dealing more damage, and some of the enemies were even performing mechanics that one would expect from bosses, so all of this surprised me. Once again, this doesn't mean that the grind has completely stopped, but because there was an actual story mode in between the missions, I didn't feel bothered. The game even made me laugh when the shadow soldiers were competing for the Orb of Avarice. One would expect that Jin-woo will just give the orb to one of the mage shadow soldiers by default, but Tank and Iron wanted to prove their power to their king, so they just joined the competition, which had nothing to do with brute force. Iron thought that hitting his enemies with the Orb of Avarice will count as victory, but just like Tank thinking that the orb will be useful in his mouth, they have both failed, and instead the mage shadow soldiers were given the orb for the time being. Even after this, Iron was carrying the story, and Jin-woo also started to question how and why the system is actually helping him, but I'm explaining too much Solo Leveling lore. This is a video about the game and not the anime. Back to the game. I did forget to talk about a major issue I had in my first video, and that was the performance problems. Not only did I start lagging on my mobile phone, which by the way is an iPhone 13, but even my PC had difficulties or lower resolution. Even the autopilot glitched out a couple of times when I entered the portal. I had to completely restart the game. The lag is especially visible in the first few minutes of my last video, but if you pay attention to the gameplay right now, this wasn't an editing error on my part. This is just the game being badly optimized. This was especially annoying when I have reached the chapter where I have entered Kargalan's dungeon. The game threw more monsters, sometimes even multiple bosses and me, which meant that more lag was incoming, which is a shame because this chapter specifically was challenging. Unless I had twice the battle score of the dungeon, even the autopilot failed the missions, though if I have to be honest, it was only because the game has no idea how to jump out of AoE attacks, When I have entered the red gate and had to fight Baruko with my followers, they kept constantly dying until I decided to actually play. As I have said, however, Kargana's dungeon was the turning point, but not only for the better. Cutscenes were less frequent, and I have started to recognize the mindless grind once again. Luckily, this also gave me some time to figure out my inventory, and I have pretty much doubled my battle score. My team was made by Jim Chul, Cha Hae-in, and Choi Jong-in, 3 characters that in my opinion were not the greatest matchup, but they all serve their purpose, especially when I have doubled their power level. Jim Chul felt like an indestructible tank, Cha Hae-in was fast and deadly, while Choi Jong-in was just throwing nukes at all his problems. Before leveling anything, I have faced a mission where Kargalan kept throwing bosses after bosses at me, and I have always had about 40 seconds remaining before I could defeat all of them, but after the level up, they were easy to beat. I do feel like it's hard for newcomers to understand how to boost their power level of your characters, because this game loves to throw huge walls of text in your face, combined with either the gacha reminders or the infinite amount of currencies. A good game makes you want to waste your time, while a bad game will force you to waste it. And unfortunately, solo leveling Arise constantly forces me to waste my time, but to its defense, this is one of the better mobile games that I have ever played, and I am willing to return next week to finish the Demon Castle and the Jeju Island Rain, however long they are. They're gonna force me to grind more, aren't they? That's gonna do it for today's video, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think of my journey in solo leveling Arise. In this video I kept yapping a bit too much about topics that you might not be too interested about, but I do wanna know if you have enjoyed this format. The journey itself is not complete if you don't know how it all started, so if you're curious of my first few weeks in solo leveling Arise, then go ahead and click on this video. Hope you all have had a fantastic day, stay safe, until next time boys, peace!